A trade tension soaring between Washington and Beijing, with China announcing further tariffs on American products to 125%, 2 days after a hike to 84%. That change set to take effect from tomorrow, threatening further instability. While China's latest move falls short of the 145% that the US president slapped on Chinese goods this week, retaliation has intensified economic turmoil unleashed by Washington's tariffs. However, Beijing says it will ignore further tariff hikes from Washington. China is currently the only Asian nation imposing reciprocal tariffs on the US. In contrast, its neighbors have been reaching out to Washington for a reprieve before time is up on the now less than 90-day pause on reciprocal duties. The US and Vietnam have agreed to begin formal discussions, Washington emphasizing the importance of continued engagement with trade partners, as well as the need for quick progress to resolve any outstanding issues. Hanoi faces a 46% tariff that is one of the highest, and it has been scrambling to appease Washington. Meanwhile, Thai authorities have vowed to crack down on false claims of origin in U.S. exports as it prepares for negotiations with the Trump administration. This is to secure relief from its own 36% tariff hit. A Thai delegation is set to visit the U.S. in the coming weeks, while the government has proposed buying more American goods. Beijing, meanwhile, has been moving quickly to strengthen its own ties with other countries. President Xi Jinping set to begin a 3-nation tour of Southeast Asia next week, aiming to consolidate ties with some of Beijing's closest neighbors amid growing global uncertainty.
此次访问是习近平主席今年的首次出访，对推动中国同越南、马来西亚、柬埔寨以及中国东盟关系的整体发展具有重大意义，也将为地区乃至世界的和平稳定注入新动能。
And for more insight, we're joined by CNA's Olivia Siong. She joins me in the studio, and Nick Harper live from Washington, D.C. Let's start with you, Olivia. I think anyone now, us certainly, maybe even analysts, would be ill-advised to make any clear projections on who will be doing what next. But in that context, this move from Beijing, surprising or not?
In some ways, analysts did say that it was just going to be a matter of time before China hit back. But the timing of China's announcement is something that is of significance. Beijing waiting, not announcing what it would do after President Trump announced that further hike in tariffs of to 125%, which we now know is stacked on top of the March tariffs of 20%, bringing the total to 145%. And so China announced its latest hike, its tit-for-tat hike on U.S. imports today at 4 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. Very carefully calibrated. Analysts I've spoken to say this came at the close of trading for the Chinese market and before U.S. markets opened. 2 reasons that China could have done this. One, to limit damage on its own capital market. You know, with the capital markets, the turmoil that we have seen, it has implications for domestic sentiment. And China has been stepping in to intervene and prop up the stock market. The second purpose here with this particular timing is to inflict possibly maximum damage on the U.S. capital market before it opens, maximum pressure that we're talking about here, targeting it as what the leadership may see as a weakness of the U.S.
All right, timing is one thing. What China chooses to use from a toolbox of things that it can, in fact, use, that also we're seeing bringing a suit to the WTO. It could also further curb exports of certain items, such as critical minerals as well. What can you expect next? That would be in keeping with this trend, you say maximum pain, but calibrated.
So first let's talk about the tariffs, right? Because as it stands now, analysts have already been saying whether it's 125% tariffs, 145% tariffs, 1,000% tariffs, it's not going to matter anymore. Trade is effectively disrupted. There is a trade embargo effectively in place on both sides. It's not going to happen. And this was reflected by China's Commerce Ministry today, in which it said that this has become a numbers game which has no practical significance economically, saying that it has, quote, become a joke, and that if the US continues to play this tariff numbers game, that China is going to ignore it. So likely, if that statement is to be believed, this is the last we're going to see of the tariff escalation. But then analysts are telling me that this should not be seen by any means as de-escalation. You talked about that toolbox there. There's also the fight on the financial front that we're talking about. Moody's saying that the U.S. is more vulnerable than the U.S. To a decline in stock prices. They noted that almost 2/3 of Americans' households own some stock, relatively fewer Chinese own stocks. So China also willing to step in to prop up its market. That's one. Another thing we're looking out for is export controls on critical minerals. These metals are crucial because they're needed to make computer chips, electric vehicles. China produces a majority of these, which the U.S. imports. And as it stands now, there are 15 elements on China's export control list. Analysts, including the Economist Intelligence Unit, are saying that potentially we could see 13 more added to this export list. But let's not only focus on what China is doing to the US, we should also look at what it's doing at home, because we know that this trade war is going to be bruising, especially for exporters. And it's important that China is also making sure that it is not inflicting too much pain on its domestic firms. And so today we saw big tech companies getting involved. Reports saying Alibaba supermarket Hema officially announced they will open a fast-track channel for Chinese exporters to become part of the platform to help them leverage the domestic market. JD.com announcing it will spend 200 billion yuan to help exporters go domestic amid this trade war. All of this is critical, as even both sides are saying that they are willing to talk. But it's also a matter, as one analyst told me, is who bleeds more. And that will affect negotiations.
All right. China, the domestic side, but however much it wants to boost its domestic consumption, there's a limit to how much domestically it can absorb its own manufactured products. So it's going to be needing some help from other countries now that we're seeing a more serious decoupling between the US and China. So not surprising. Wang Wentao there speaking with ASEAN online, the Chinese president himself taking a very prominent role in expanding and warming up ties with other countries in this very uncertain time.
Yeah, and we just have to look at the context, right? The numbers say it all. For every 5 goods that the Chinese send to the US only sends 1. So China is having to look for new markets to export to, and there has been a flurry of diplomatic activity that you mentioned there. President Xi today holding talks in Beijing with the visiting Spanish Prime Minister, saying that China and the EU should join together in defending globalization and oppose, quote, unilateral acts of bullying. China also holding talks with Saudi Arabia, South Africa. We know that, as you mentioned there, President Xi will be visiting those 3 Southeast Asian nations, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia. This is going to be a closely watched visit of high significance, because this is also President Xi's first overseas trip for this year. And these countries are also in the midst of negotiating with the US. And analysts I've been speaking to say China will be wanting to go into these meetings, presenting itself as a credible partner with opportunities, not just in trade, its big market, but also other projects like connectivity. And so it will be interesting to see how these ASEAN countries, in the midst of negotiating with the US, play this balancing act that ASEAN countries have sought to do as it looks to welcome President Xi to their countries.
Oh, thanks. Olivia Siong in the studio here with us. Let's head to Nick Harper in Washington, D.C. Nick, hearing Olivia there, we're all looking for some silver linings here. China is saying it will not hike tariffs further because this is a numbers game that makes no practical sense. Is this likely to buy any kind of softening from the Trump administration?
I think trying to work out Donald Trump's thinking pretty much on anything is a little tricky. If anything, he is consistently unpredictable, often chopping and changing his mind, as we've seen this week with that pause on the tariffs coming very unexpectedly. So I think it's a little difficult to anticipate what he might try and do next. And I think that is causing a real problem for Republicans, for companies, for analysts to work out his next moves. His policies, though, over the course of this week at least, have been clearly reactionary, rather than perhaps fully thought out by the Trump team. That was clear when he made the pause on Wednesday on the tariffs against other countries. It was because he said that US markets, and particularly the bond market, were falling. What is clear, I think, at this stage is that tit for tat is back, but it's up to the US president to now decide whether he wants to impose more tariffs on China, or as we heard there from Olivia, whether it's even worth it, because trade is essentially dead at this point. As we've mentioned, China has already said that it will ignore any further US moves. But businesses are sounding the alarm. BlackRock's chief executive just this morning has compared these current tariffs to the financial crisis, COVID, and surging inflation in 2022, wrapping all of those things together to point out how bad things are now. It's also worrying the markets. A quick look at Wall Street. It seems investors don't know which way to turn this morning. Market futures were up, then down, up again at the moment, ever so slightly. The Dow up about 1.2%, the S&P up 0.3%, and the Nasdaq up 0.4%. Markets open in about an hour and 20 minutes' time. We'll have to wait and see whether they manage to hang on to those gains and end this day in positive territory.
So the immediate effects of tariffs, as well as all the second-order effects on consumer, business and investor sentiment. Now, Mr. Trump, what we do know, and he did say this because he said this on his social media account, he was waiting for President Xi Jinping to give him a call. It's just that China did not know how to get started. So we do know that he might like to make that deal with China. If that deal, at this point, certainly unclear, should ever be struck, what do you think it might involve?
Well, I think it's really difficult to see how all of this will play out when both sides are just ratcheting it up with these tariffs, increased tariffs, countermeasures. And I think for Donald Trump, the problem for him throughout has been trying to spell out clearly what his end game is. That's been worrying lawmakers within his own party. They've really been pushing him to try and spell things out, to try and calm the markets, but also calm the country. That strategy has been partly to try and use the tariffs as a threat to negotiate. He would like to get President Xi to the negotiating table. It's not clear if the Chinese leader will actually want to do that, but Donald Trump did say on Thursday that he thought that both sides would end up working out something that's very good for both countries. It's just not clear how to break that impasse as both sides continue to put on more tariffs. One side would need to back down or capitulate in order to get to the negotiating table. And the damage, of course, could be enormous. Before Donald Trump's return to office, the average tariffs charged by each side was less than 20%. That has increased massively now. It's going to hurt consumers. We'll see costs rise. It'll hurt key voting blocks like farmers, and it will certainly cause problems for his voters out there as he looks ahead to next term's midterm elections.
Oh, thanks. Then Nick Harper, they're reporting live from Washington, D.C.